Welcome back to another episode of the Twin Elements podcast, proudly presented by Venture Hunting and Outdoors. If you're like us and passionate about hunting, spearfishing, and many other outdoor-related pursuits, with an eagerness to fast-track your learning, then this podcast is perfect for you. G'day legends, and welcome back to another episode of the Twin Elements podcast. Today's episode is going to be a quick one, hopefully. 2025 has been an incredible year for us here at Twin Elements, full of epic hunts, lots of stories, lessons learned, and certainly some moments that we're still buzzing from. Today, we're looking back on some of this year's highlights and successful hunts, reflecting on our overall growth here at Twin Elements and giving you all a sneak peek into what's coming in 2026. As always, we will conclude the show by answering your questions in a bit of a rapid fire rate today. So if you have any questions, please email them through to us at info@twinelements.com.au. Please use the subject line FAQ, or send us a DM on Instagram or any of our other socials through either Twin Elements, Ayden Doumtsis Outdoors, or James Doumtsis Outdoors. Without further ado, we'll get into the highlights.
When you're out hunting, your camouflage needs to blend in or cost you opportunities. That's why I run Numa camouflage clothing. Built for hunters who push hard, Numa is quiet, durable, and designed to disappear in everything from open tussock to thick mountain terrain. Whether you're heading out on a multi-day hunt, glassing big country, or slogging it out in the rain, Numa keeps you dry, comfortable, and helps you push further. So if you're gearing up for your next adventure, check out the full range at Venture Hunting and Outdoors and level up your hunting kit with Numa. Built for the outdoors, built for the hunt.
Well, what a year. This year, we certainly had some epic hunts across Australia and, of course, the USA. Moving linearly, we will wind the clock back and start at the beginning of 2025 naturally. So to kick us off, we're going to travel back in time, back to the Basalt Wall region of North Queensland, Australia, hunting Chital deer stags in what was a wet, soggy hunt to say the least. On this hunt, I had been in the thick of it. Around 100 millimeters of rain in a day or two had pushed the deer into some of that sort of higher elevation basalt wall country. There were mobs of up to 100, maybe even 200 deer living up there in the rocks and out of the water that was sort of sitting laying on the flats after a couple of days of rain. So while glassing a mob of Chital deer from downwind, I assessed pretty quickly that there wasn't a stag worthy of a stalk. So I naturally sort of continued observing them as I do, getting a bit of footage. In all honesty, it was a pretty cool encounter. The stags were rutting, rubbing trees, preaching, sparring, mounting hinds, you name it. The normal works during the rut, they were sort of exhibiting all of that behaviour. That's when I decided to move, looking for a new deer in similar zones. I knew where the deer were based on the deer's behaviour at the time. They weren't down low on the flats where there was water sort of sitting on the basalt soil. They were up high amongst the rocks in drier sort of zones. So I did a big loop and approached a bench that in my mind should be up high and dry for the deer to be bedding on. From nearly a kilometre away, I glassed up a bachelor mob of stags, and immediately one stag just simply stood out. The type of stag that I was after, one that makes your eyebrows raise when you see them. Big, heavy, just pretty much dwarfing the other stags that stood around him. So with the target animal in the sights, I planned my stalk. For about half an hour or so, I just shadowed them, letting them feed and watching them settle as a number of the stags began to bed down for the day. Once they committed to a patch of trees, I closed the gap pretty quickly. The approach was pretty direct with a decent tree line to work with. Plus, with over 100 millimetres of rain, the ground was very soft and silent. The main thing I watched and waited for was for the 20-odd stags to start chewing their cud. Once they were doing that, I knew that they were relaxed. I closed the gap from around 1 kilometre to around 30 metres with ease. From the moment I saw the stag, I had committed to getting him killed. I ranged everything out in front of me for when the stag would eventually stand. At 30 metres, he looked incredibly impressive. I tried not to focus on him too much, as we do, instead watching the other stags' mannerisms, watching as they would, one by one, eventually stand up, have a stretch, feed, and then rebed. All of them were moving and bedding further away, which led me to believe that when the mature stag stood, he would do the same. After almost an hour, eventually he stands, but as I feared, there's no shot. As quickly as he had rose from his bed, he angled away, walked off, and then bedded again. So now it's a waiting game. Before I could push in and close the gap back to within bow range, I needed things to change. There were around 8 or so younger stags between me and my target deer. All of them would have to reshuffle over the next little bit, getting up, moving away in the same direction, and settling into their next beds as well. This took some time, as you can imagine, but where else would you rather be? At this point, I was 40 metres off the stag, watching his mighty antlers sway in the grass. Once they were all up and accounted for, I was finally in a position to approach. The stag was bedded just perfect. A good angle, good lane. The only issue was that I had no more vertical cover between me, the stag, and his 20-odd mates. I knew right then that if I could belly crawl in without getting busted, it was on. From about 40 metres out, I started sliding forward on my hips. It was a low and slow approach. I kept watching his antlers, and then, eventually, his eyes, and then I could monitor his cud chewing, all in an effort to try and keep tabs on how alert he was. Meanwhile, I've got 20 plus other stags scattered around me that I'm constantly checking on too. When everything finally lined up, I find myself at 20 metres. I visualised the spot I needed to hit, quite literally, aiming for a white dot on his heart. I drew from a laying down position, hunched over, then slowly raised myself just enough to clear the bow. Amazingly, he was still bedded, fully relaxed. No string jump to worry about, just aiming. And that's the shot I took. I watched the arrow zip through the stag and he ran around 40 yards before toppling over. With that, I had kick-started 2025 with an incredible stalk on an even more amazing animal. The stag was a beast, all 30 plus inches of him, his epic cape, thick antlers, and beautiful red meat. I carried the cargo back to the car and escaped the rain, only to begin my trip south for the fast approaching red deer rut. The second highlight of 2025 was the red deer roar. So rather than discuss the whole red deer rut, I'll focus on a few select moments. The moments that come to mind are the ones that are in your face, crazy action, ones that we all envisage when thinking about bow hunting the rut. Roaring red stags or croaking fellow bucks marching into range in a fiery close encounter. This particular morning was full on. We were in the Brisbane Valley in Queensland, Australia. James and I had a few close calls right off the bat. The first stag was an older 4x4 we managed to call in. He came trotting straight towards us and unfortunately winded us at about 20 yards. Nothing you could do about that one. The breeze just flicked at the wrong moment. Not long after, and we encountered a younger 3x3. He came charging into a few location roars, but wasn't what we were after. Everything we were seeing up to this point of the trip was pretty young. The valley was full of noise, lots of movement. It was the peak rut for sure, but we just hadn't sighted anything mature enough to get excited about. Then we heard a roar roll across from the opposite side of the ridge. Big, deep, and coming from down in a thick gully. We hit him with a few hindcalls to try and pull him out of the scrub, and eventually we saw him. Our first sighting was from around 80 metres away. Immediately we knew this was our mature stag, the animal we were after. Naturally, he was cautious, but he started meandering his way towards us. We kept directing the hind calls up and across the ridge to coax him into a better shooting lane, and slowly but surely he committed. Because of how steep the country was, even when he got to 30 metres, then 20, the high vegetation meant there was still no clear shot. Still, he kept approaching. The hind calls were irresistible. At 20 metres, I finally came to full draw. He was roaring right in our faces, and I'm holding for what felt like an eternity, but in reality ended up only being around a minute 20 seconds. All that time, he inched closer and closer. Just when I thought he was going to step into an opening, he stops. A mere 10 metres away, directly behind a massive ironbark tree. I couldn't see a thing except for his 6x6 frame and antlers beyond the tree. But I remembered the sound, his roar, so close, echoing from out behind the tree. He takes a few more steps, coming into 7 metres, lets out a couple more roars, and that's when I picked my spot and sent the arrow. Absolute chaos ensued. My heart pounding, stag roaring, the shot cracking. You would remember, those lav mics picked up everything and we shared it on some of the earlier podcasts and on our socials. Just like that, I had taken my personal best red stag. A 10-year hiatus ended after finally picking up my bow for the rut. He was a heavy 6x6, my best stag, but a memorable hunt. Exactly how you like them during the roar, up close and personal. Leaving southeast Queensland on a high, we travelled down to New South Wales. We didn't know it at the time, but James and I had just left some insane action and were headed to a wasteland. Over the next couple of weeks, we only heard a handful of roars. That's to be expected to some extent when hunting quality genetics over sheer quantity of deer numbers. However, the contrast in action was dumbfounding. It was hard to be positive with so little action, but we continued the grind. The next morning rolls around, full moon, dead quiet, no roaring anywhere. Trying the usual tactics, upglassing early, a bit of calling, but nothing was really going our way. We were pretty much calling it a morning. Had started walking back to the car to pick up Dad from the airport. In fact, we were only around 500 metres away from the ute when we hear this faint, almost cow-like moo. But James and I knew there were no cattle in that paddock. In fact, that's why we had walked in an attempt to find some sign and maybe a lead as to where a stag was hiding out. So instantly, we were like, that's a stag. You could hear the excitement in each other's voices. The game was on. We quickly shed the packs and slip into his stand of trees along a beautiful ridge around 150 metres from where we suspected the stag was calling. In position, we start working a few hind calls, trying to draw him out of the thick dogwood below. Visibility was really good, so we just settled in and let the bush quieten around us. The first thing we see is a kangaroo bursting down the ridge, then 2 shapes behind it, 2 stags. A spiker on the left, and then a much larger stag on the right. I whispered to James asking for the green light, and he gives me the all clear. All I knew in the rush was that this stag had a huge frame and points up top. At around 25 to 30 metres, the stag pauses and lets out this really solid roar. I remember it to this day. Then he keeps coming, right into that 20-metre pocket. His head slips behind a large tree, so I draw back. I'm purposefully letting him walk himself into a better angle, searching for that hind that he knows is about. He's starting to turn quartering on, then almost broadside, so I give him a soft hind call to pull him up exactly where we needed him. I settle the pin and release. The arrow hits him square through the shoulder and punches into the heart. I watched it in slow motion to the point that I remember on impact, the shaving sharp Cayuga broadhead cuts off a tuft of his hair which poofs into the air. I remember watching that floating hair amongst slow motion, whilst at the same time the stag exploded into action. Jumping into action like he's been lit up, he bolts maybe 30 or 40 metres. I hind call again, and he actually relaxes, turns to listen, and then just tips over. A perfect shot, perfect finish, and such a wild turnaround after a completely silent morning. Looking back on the season, I really feel like I managed to capitalise on the hunts this year. The opportunities lined up, the hard work paid off, and I was lucky enough to be the one behind the bow when things fell into place. But the funny part is, so much of that success traces back to James. James was the one who scouted for 2025. He walked the ridges, glassed the basins, found the pockets where those stags were living way back in 2024. He was also the one who knocked on doors, built relationships, and secured the property access that made all of our 2025 red deer season possible. And honestly, heading into 2026, I've got this feeling that he's due. He put in all the groundwork last season in regards to the reds, and it's only a matter of time before the favour swings back his way. The 2026 rut is only a few months away now, and I'm keen for James to target one of those mega red stags. The kind that makes all the scouting, the miles, early starts, glassing sessions, trail camera setups, conversation with property owners, late night finishes, all of those inputs absolutely worth it. He's earned it, and I can't wait to see him finally send an arrow at one of those big boys he's been trying to find for us. Huntin' Fool is the foremost hunting resource with varied levels of membership to get you on your next adventure. If you've seen some of our recent USA-based adventures and that's got you thinking about a hunt of your own, then listen up. Whether it be an eagerness towards planning annual trips or you're more time poor and want to plan towards a bigger, once-in-a-lifetime adventure, you're in the right place. Huntin' Fool and the consultancy team will cater to your needs regardless of your desired hunt. James and I have been utilising their services for a couple of years now, and virtually all of our USA adventures are shaped by the guidance of our friends, the Huntin' Fool advisors. Not sure where to start when planning a USA hunt? No problem. Not sure how to apply for tags? No dramas. Simply set a budget and have a general idea of what species you want to hunt, and the team at Huntin' Fool will start narrowing the hunt to your preferences. If you're interested in using Huntin' Fool's license application services to draw more tags across the Western United States, then email applications@huntinfool.com and start the conversation today. Mention Twin Elements to get 25% off your first year of service. The Huntin' Fool team will take it from there. The next hunting highlight that I wanted to mention is obviously the USA trip, Montana, USA. We won't go too deep into the USA hunt in this episode. A lot of that content is still fresh on our socials, and most of you have already seen the highlights, the tags we filled, and some of the crazier moments from that month-long grind. But what I can say with absolute certainty is that James and I achieved a lot over there, and we're honestly so keen to share the full story with you all. The USA in general was all about firsts for us. Both James and I managed to shoot our first pronghorn bucks, a pair of exceptionally old animals with impressive horns. I managed my first bull elk after only 2 days of elk hunting season, and James managed his first mule deer buck also. We've got a stack of footage banked, and 2026 is when it'll all start rolling out properly on the Twin Elements YouTube channel. The films, the breakdowns, the behind the scenes, it's all coming. So while we're not unpacking the whole USA trip today on this podcast, just know that there's some epic content coming and it's on the way. For anyone that does want to hear any particular USA stories, go back to the last few episodes of the Twin Elements podcast. I know that starting at number 30 something, there's gear selections for the US, there's preparation and mindset for the US. Going into the 40s, we start to talk about the bull elk that I shoot, the pronghorn that James shoots, the mule deer that James shoots, the pronghorn that I shoot, as well as some elk heartbreak, mule deer, failed stalks, you name it. There's a heap of stuff there. Even last week's podcast where we talk about lessons learnt from the US and things that we also did really, really well. The same goes for our recent Cape York trip with Cayuga Adventures. We don't want to dive too deep into that today either. We basically rolled straight out of the USA, landed back in Australia and kept the momentum going by heading north to chase some proper toothy Cape York boars. That trip was a grind in its own way. whether it was the brutal heat, thick noisy scrub, or poor swirling wind and that remote Australian bush that just doesn't give you anything for free. But it was unreal all the same. It was an amazing, amazing experience. We hunted with some good friends, Brad Smith and Maddie Moore, plus our father, Nick Doumtsis, even came along for the journey and experienced some of that hooky Cape York boar hunting. We'll save the full story for early 2026. Our first 3 podcasts of the year will kick off with recounts from that specific hunt. So we'll break it all down, the ins, the outs, the lessons, and plenty of story time from those specific hunts. So please stay tuned for that. Next up, I just wanted to talk about gear and fitness in particular. As the year wraps up and we talk through some of our 2025 hunt highlights, one thing that really stood out this year, and honestly, every year as we hunt more and do this sort of thing more, is just how important quality, reliable gear is. Having equipment that you can put away after a hunt, pull out, whether it be a day, week, a few months later, and trust completely, that's been absolutely vital for us. When you're traveling for hunts like we do, filming hunts and pushing hard, nothing destroys a hunt faster than gear you can't depend on. So a massive shout out to all of the brands that have carried us on our past hunts and to those companies which have joined us throughout 2025 and beyond into 2026. Just as gear has been important for us and we constantly tinker, remove, add and rely on new bits of gear, fitness has always been a constant for James and I. If you guys recall, one of our first ever Twin Elements podcasts go way back to the start of 2025. We spoke to you guys about fitness and a general lifestyle approach back in early 2025. I'm happy to report back personally that I was able to complete my goal of 1,300 kilometers run this year. That was 5 kilometers run 5 days a week over the full year period to get to that number. And I'm happy to say that I was able to tick that off at the end of November. I know that milestone has kept me mentally and physically prepared for hunting, and something that James too has experienced with his own set of goals. When I talk to him about his fitness, I think that him buying his stair machine and having it at home has been one of the biggest investments for his hunting lifestyle and overall health. Being fit and strong made a lot of these hunts easier than they otherwise would have been. And that's something we both want to continue to build upon and replicate heading into 2026. I think, to put it simply, you've got to be pretty hunt obsessed to buy a stair machine and put it in your office or living room and sneak that one past the better half. Aside from the hunting, we've had a big year of growth across all of our social media platforms. On YouTube specifically, the Northern Territory Bowhunting series was greatly received, hunting for critters like bantang, water buffalo and wild boars. We obviously want to build on that series and continue to grow on YouTube. Hence, we have lined up around 20 films dropping each and every week on the YouTube channel from 6 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time every Wednesday, as I've said. So our Montana elk bow hunt from 2023 is dropping currently. That's an 8-part series, followed by the epic 2025 rut footage that you've just heard about here. Watch those red stag bow hunts unfold in February 2026. We then have more adventures from the NT hunting feral pigs and buffalo with our dad, a series of films from Cape York hunts with hooky boars hitting the deck. Then what I'm probably most proud of and, really excited to release is the epic film series from our most recent USA hunts, dropping in mid-2026. 2025 hasn't just been about views online. We've had the opportunity, James and I, to both attend events this year and meet many of you, our valuable listeners, in person. Starting off at the Venture Hunt Rut Ready event, where James and I gave tips on hunting roaring red stags and fallow bucks. We also did a bit of a movie screening that night and just did a bit of a question and answer, which was absolutely amazing. We then flew into Wodonga in Victoria for the Flow State Outdoors Expo, capping off the year with a recent visit to the Wild Deer Expo. We're equally as keen to see all of you in 2026 and can't wait for the next event to catch up with all of you legends in the Australian hunting and outdoor community. And finally, we've got to talk about the Twin Elements podcast. This is our first full year doing this. We're 52 episodes in. When James and I launched it, we honestly had no idea how it would go. No big strategy behind it, just two blokes talking hunting, filming, gear, and all the stories that sit behind the moments people see online. But the organic growth has blown us away. Every month the numbers climbed, more downloads, more regular listeners. What we loved was the overall engagement. An abundance of unique, thoughtful messages from people tuning in on their daily commute to work. From someone working in the shed, on the tractor, or driving to their own hunts. We had some standout episodes this year, some more obvious and some we didn't expect to take off the way they did. Without a doubt, our fallow rut tactics podcast, where James and I deep dived into fallow deer biology, talking about daylight, weather, nutrition, buck to doe ratios and other factors that affected the rut. This podcast certainly comes to mind, but it was also the less scripted, less science-based episodes which hit the mark also. The tired, flawed 2 a.m. podcast on a back road in Montana after a successful bull elk. Not to mention the listener FAQ sections. James and I loved answering the questions that came through our DMs. Questions about broadheads, bow setups, scouting, boots, filming trips, you name it. It's been unreal having that direct line with everyone and hearing in on your successful hunts based off some of this help or guidance. Honestly, it's been motivating as hell for James and I. It tells us that there's a real community forming around this podcast and we're only just getting started. Heading into 2026, we're pumped. New topics, new deep dives, new guests, new hunts, and hopefully a whole new wave of listeners finding the show. We've got a pile of fresh ideas already lined up, gear breakdowns, big hunt recaps, hot tips and tactics, planning for the upcoming rut and everything in between. So if you've been here since day one, or if you only just found us, thank you from the bottom of our hearts. The Twin Elements podcast is just getting warmed up and we can't wait to take it up another level in 2026. I have personally used Hoyt bows for over 20 years now. Building the most innovative and technological advanced gear, their carbon bows are the lightest, leanest and most compact on the market. Quite frankly, I treat mine like hell. Throwing them around, banging them on rocks and scrub whilst on the hunt. Time and time again, it has performed when I've needed it most. I'm currently running the Carbon RX9 with 80-pound limbs. Even at that weight, it's easy to draw and throw absolute darts. This past year, I've been shooting the best I've ever shot, and a lot of that comes from my confidence in Hoyt. Get serious, get Hoyt. Head to their website to check them out today, or, for our Australian listeners, head in store to Venture Hunting and Outdoors. The team not only stock Hoyt, but also have tons of other important archery equipment hanging from their walls. Mention Twin Elements and they will look after you. Today, to wrap up the podcast, we are going to be doing a bit more of a rapid fire question and answer segment and try and answer a few of your questions before the new year kicks in. If you have either a question that you want answered by us or want to propose a future podcast topic heading into the new year, then please send us an email with subject line FAQ to info@twinelements.com.au, or you can simply send us a DM to either Twin Elements, Ayden Doumtsis Outdoors or James Doumtsis Outdoors across our socials. We will strive to answer them on a future episode of the podcast and have them featured. Question number 1 for today. I've heard you talk about hand movements and white faces, etc. with reflection. Do you think this relates to sunglasses? Do you wear them for hunting? I've never seen them in any of your films. Honestly, I think you sort of answered this question yourself. When you use any mankind object, be it, your rifle, bow, binoculars, you name it, sunglasses in this instance, they all reflect and cause shine, which deer and other animals might see whilst hunting. I don't know about you, but I've had mates that, are sitting opposite me and they tilt their head down suddenly and sunglasses on top of their head catch that sunlight, and it's basically like a laser beam directed at you. It just catches light and definitely makes a really bright reflection, and that's something that deer tend to see. The same as shadows and things like that, to a lesser extent. Even a bird flying over a mob of chital deer, I know that they will see shadows on the ground and look up anticipating that there's a wedge-tailed eagle coming to eat them. So I personally have a bit of a cop out for this as a answer. Like, I don't really wear sunglasses at the best of times, unless I'm like going out spearfishing and I'm on the water. So I definitely don't wear them hunting. For me, anything like sunglasses, watches, optics, whether it's binoculars, a rangefinder, even, the white or the complexion of our faces, hands, those type of things. I said rangefinders, rifles, bows, all of these things are just basically items that can reflect sunlight and then therefore can be seen, especially when making hand movements. So if you go to draw your bow, you've already got a shiny object and then you're moving it or elevating it up from, a lower position. Same as if you've got the rifle on your back and then you sling it over your shoulder and bring it to the front to look through the scope. That's a massive movement when you're holding a really bright object. So for me, when I'm close to animals and it's a game of 1%ers, I choose to not, take these things out into the field if I'm not going to use them. For me, sunglasses fall under that category. And that's also why, I try and have my watch covered. I try and wear a face buff or like a camo mask or something like that. I try to be real and slow and steady because for me, range finding is essential, but I really pick my moments when I'm going to do it. So hopefully that helps answer your question, and I appreciate you sending that one through to us. Question number 2. What new adventures or hunts are you most excited to tackle in 2026? Honestly, we're largely going to run a lot of the hunts, that we've done in 2025 back in 2026. The year's probably going to look pretty similar, especially at the start. For me personally, there'll be a lot of, local Chital deer based around Townsville in North Queensland. I'm sure that James is going to be hunting goats, frill pigs, foxes, and fallow and reds whilst they're pre-rut around home for James. The next big hunt that we will be doing together is probably like March, April, when we're going to be hunting the red deer raw and fallow deer rut down in sort of the Hunter Valley area, maybe even Brisbane Valley, similar to what we did this year. The next thing that we're going to try and do is James and I are planning on hunting hog deer in 2026 as well. So we're both incredibly excited about that. It will be a new experience for both James and I. So we're definitely eager to learn more about that species and hopefully take a stag between us or a stag each, or even just see some and have an opportunity to hunt them, because again, for us, that's going to be a new adventure, a new experience, and that's pretty exciting. I would then say that we're keen to build on our USA trip knowledge and just experiences from this year. I know that James has his hopes set for a tag in Colorado, chasing high country mule deer in particular. And then also he has a number of points in Wyoming. So potentially a Wyoming bull elk hunt in one of those units. There's just simply so much to do over there in America, but it's all realistically about what tags we draw. We'll be putting in for that draw in those lottery systems and then just seeing what we can draw back at the end of the day. Question number 3. Will there be new guests or collaborations on the podcast this year? So this is an exciting one. Listeners can definitely expect some new fresh voices coming to the Twin Elements podcast in 2026. Our podcast last week with Grant Rand about Cayuga broadheads and broadheads in general was really, really well received. I think his general expertise and knowledge as an engineer really help that, or I guess portray what's important in the design process of broadheads. So we're looking to do similar with other bits of gear that we use, as well as just different hunting strategies as well. So as with Grant, a lot of the podcasts that we do with Dad or have done with Dad, our father, Nick Doumtsis, have been overwhelmingly positively received. People really enjoy getting Dad behind the mic, sharing his stories, experiences. And I think what people love most is just his genuine love for us and the outdoors, and hearing that he's still doing that at the ripe old age of, 60 years old. So that's always one that's well received. And then in 2026, we have a podcast airing with Brad Smith and Matt Moore after our recent hunt at Cayuga Adventures. So That's a few guests that I can think of. Plus, there will just be plenty more of these sit down and chats with people within the industry, especially people that we feel need access to a platform to share their knowledge, tips, or perspectives. So, yes, in short, we're definitely going to have more collaborations, more new guests on the podcast moving forwards in 2026. We will get a few special guests on so that it's not just mine or James's voices that you're hearing moving forwards. Question number 4. What kind of behind the scenes content can we expect on socials and YouTube this year? In 2026, I think James and I have got a bit of a mutual agreement that we are going to look to incorporate more sort of how-to videos like hot tips and so forth on our YouTube channel and across Instagram. For example, a few of the short form reels that we've been posting on Instagram, such as this one certainly comes to mind. We did a video from the USA with my bull elk on how to remove an eye fillet, again, from that bull elk. And it was just really, really well received. We had a heap of people messaging us privately being like, hey, that's so awesome. Thanks for sending that through. Like, I previously haven't done that, or I've had to gut the animal to get in there and retrieve the eye fillet. So I think trying to make a bit more of a segment that adds information, and that's one thing that the podcast does a really good job of, is sharing information, tips, that verbal communication. And we probably lose that sometimes in some of our more, I guess, cinematic YouTube videos where the goal is to sort of portray the adventure in a really pleasing way. So I think combining a bit of that information and story sharing through these little how-tos and hot tips could be really, really beneficial for you guys. And the people that watch and, absorb our content. So hopefully, you'll be seeing the same quality that you see in our films, but then also get a bit more of a behind the scenes, in-depth relationship with us. And we'll hopefully be able to just share some more instructional videos to help other hunters out there and just keep building this community of Australian hunters. Question number 5. Are there any changes to how you're approaching hunts or filming this year? There aren't necessarily any changes to the way that we are going to hunt or the way that we're going to film necessarily. I think that because we've been doing it for so long and we consider ourselves relatively successful at both bow hunting and then capturing those hunts, and just based on the years and years of refining our process based on our strong sort of hunting ethics and then obviously the experiences that we have when hunting, it's going to be difficult for us to change it up too much. But one thing I can say, I guess, into approaching 2026 is that we're going to try and utilize a video editor in the future. And I don't want you guys to get alarmed. It's going to be the same quality control, but as you guys would have seen, James and I have a mountain of work on with Twin Elements at all times. Just the amount of work that goes into every social media post, every scheduled post, every reel, every TikTok, every Facebook, every YouTube, every single podcast that launches every single week without fail. There is a mountain of work behind it, plus obviously having families, full-time jobs, all the other commitments that, everyone else has that we're not going to whinge about. But one thing for sure, if we can get some assistance in delivering our hunts to you as the viewers a lot quicker, in terms of duration. So it's not like a year between an American hunt getting seen by you or a year between the red deer raw, but still be able to do that a lot quicker, say like a month turnaround, 2 month turnaround, 3 month turnaround, whatever it may be. As long as it's quicker and with similar comparable quality, then we're going to explore that option, even if it's at a cost to us, James and I having to pay a third party editor. But that third party editor definitely makes sense for us, just on the sense that rather than James or I having to be editing all the time, we can hopefully just be hunting more out in the field, making even more epic content and more memories. And I know our partners are probably hearing this going, more time in the field, like, geez. But I think just our general everyday lives would be so much better if we could come home from a hunt, genuinely sit down and relax and enjoy ourselves, spend more time with our partners, that quality time, then go on a hunt, simply hunt and film our trips, rather than have to come home and then unpack it all, like go through all the content, make reels, edit all the images, edit all the videos, and then on top of that, create these massive, 20-minute films that sometimes take weeks and weeks, hundreds of hours to make just for a 15-minute YouTube video. So for us, tidying that up, shortening that process is going to be super rewarding. And hopefully we can get a video editor in the future that will give us a bit of that assistance that we're trying to achieve. Question number 6. What are you most looking forward to sharing with the Twin Elements community in 2026? I'll just come straight off the bat and say that 2026 is going to look very, very different for me personally. Without giving too much away, I'm really, really keen to see what the year brings. We have a podcast planned in January, I believe, end of January, maybe start of Feb, where Dad and I are going to sit down, and I might have to share some more info with you all then in regards to what I'm sort of alluding to here. But that's all I'm going to say for now. The fact that for me, hunting might not be my, I guess, be-all, end-all highlight for 2026 is pretty incredible. And I'm very, very excited about the future prospect and all that brings. So 2026, I think, is going to be the best year yet for a number of reasons. I'm very, very keen to just keep building, hopefully turn this YouTube delivery system around a bit quicker, where we can just keep building and get, every Wednesday night is a Twin Elements movie night. I'd really love to also, if we could take editing off our work plate and James and I could do more live Q&As, whether it be on YouTube or Instagram, some sort of media or platform, I guess, and where people, say subscribe or become a member of our Twin Elements YouTube. And every second Wednesday, we are doing a planned Q&A where we just chat and basically have a forum where people here in Australia can just openly, in a safe space, ask questions. We answer those questions and just have conversations, basically like a live podcast. Something like that could be really, really cool for 2026 and building that up with the Twin Elements community. So that for me would probably be a suitable answer to this question. But ultimately, that's all for our FAQ segment today. Really appreciate everyone sending those in. Looking forward to 2026 and new podcast topics, new information being delivered to you guys, and I hope you guys have enjoyed this one. So that's a wrap on 2025. An epic year of hunts, stories, and media from us. And as I've alluded to, 2026 is shaping up to be even bigger again. New hunts, new stories, and new moments from James and me and the whole Twin Elements community. So thanks for sticking with us this year, and we can't wait to bring you along for the next chapter. Please continue to subscribe, review, and rate the podcast. It helps us out immensely, and even sharing it with a friend, someone in the hunting community, joining them up to get them as a frequent listener helps us grow this community and, viewership that is keen Australian outdoorsmen and women. Ultimately, we hope you all had a Merry Christmas, a safe and happy New Year's that is up and coming, and we will be seeing you in 2026. Thank you, legends. We'll catch you next week in the new year for the next episode of the Twin Elements podcast.